Hey everyone, and welcome back to Exposing SMG. Today we're going to talk about Meghan Markle's Archetypes podcast, the problem with it, and the problem with Meghan Markle in general. Consider this my full review of the podcast, and I will continue to update it as more episodes are released weekly. Now, I've covered a lot of Meghan Markle on my channel and my blog, and it's very telling when everything Meghan Markle does, people find lies in it, irritating victim narratives, or just a forced fake facade from the self-proclaimed nice normal mom who's your average duchess. When you listen to the Archetypes podcast, you're supposed to feel empowered, inspired, and motivated because Meghan is teaching us not to fit into these stereotypical molds that she likes to call archetypes.
Gretchen, stop trying to make fetch happen. It's not going to happen.
But when I listen to Archetypes, I feel nauseated and bored. The issue with Archetypes is that Meghan is trying to teach women and push the narrative that we're victims, that society's out to get us, and to focus on the negative and highlight the negative as opposed to inspiring women to do better. Oh no, instead she brings on Serena Williams and makes her talk about a bump in the road in her career when she was called out for aggression. She chooses to focus on that and not on the fact that Serena Williams won more Grand Slam single titles than any other woman or man during the Open era in tennis. Like, what was Meghan trying to prove by bringing on Serena? It's like a free chance to talk about herself and the so-called nursery fire that happened in South Africa. A fire that didn't actually happen, but check out my video on that. After teaching women that we are victims and talking about bumps in the road and the impressive careers of the women she brings on, she switches the conversation to then gloat about how things have affected her. Without a fail, she always makes up a story about herself and doesn't offer any useful advice in the process. Like, call the podcast for what it is, Meghan, a whining story. And while calling out women for being oppressed victims and trying to make you, a woman who's listening, feel like you're an oppressed victim, and at the same time, I really don't know how she does it, it must be one of her few talents, she manages to gloat about herself and how she's perfect and follows all the rules. Nothing about it is relatable, and nothing about it is useful to the audience. The entire podcast seems like it's a revenge story, where she's trying to get back at everyone who called her out from a logical point of view because she can't dispute the victims. She did this with her podcast episode on The Angry Black Woman. She had two guests, Ziwe and Issa Rae. She starts off with two nauseating lies.
About 2 years ago, my husband and I went to have a socially distanced dinner with another couple. Actually, it was just drinks.
Well, did you have dinner or drinks, Meghan? The world will never know.
Because this was when there was still so much uncertainty with COVID. We followed all the rules and we met friends at a distance. While it was great to just have human interaction again, an even greater moment happened as we were leaving. The wife handed me a book that she said she thought I might find interesting.
Notice how she says, we followed all the rules and we met friends at a distance. And anyone who's familiar with storytelling knows how to call out someone who's so rehearsed and scripted. You know Meghan spends a lot of time trying to come across as authentic and relatable, and yet the audience just reads her as calculated and manipulative because everything she says always has some sort of hidden agenda. She couldn't even tell us a story without her painting some fairy tale where she was magically at dinner or drinks, where she was also socially distant and so happy to be having human interaction again, but nothing was greater than the book that she was handed by the unnamed wife of this couple. And oh, Meghan just tossed it aside, only really having a chance to skim it, as she said. Only truly reading it when she arrived back home in her perfect fairy tale life when she was in bed with her husband.
I thanked her, I put it in my purse, only really having a chance to skim through it once I arrived back home. And when I did, I was actually shocked. Did you know this? I kept nudging my husband as we were sitting there in bed.
Like, come on. She speaks as if she's reading a script where she's the author and is reading a story about a couple. She doesn't speak like a normal person in conversation or in general podcast conversations. Did you know this? I kept nudging my husband as we were sitting there in bed. First of all, how many times is she gonna mention, oh, me and my husband were in bed. Oh, before I go to sleep, me and my husband in bed like to watch, yada yada yada. The more you try to emphasize something, the more it seems like you are desperately trying to prove your point. I'm convinced that they don't sleep in the same bed at this point, and Harry isn't even there in all these imaginary scenarios she tells. And that's why when Meghan is trying so hard to come across as relatable and nice in everything she does, it comes off as a lie. Why? We as humans are blessed with gut feelings and being able to read people. And Meghan always comes off as rehearsed and ingenuine. That's one of the problems with archetypes. Everything she says is always being said in a story-like way that ends up making the listener ask, did this even happen? Were you really handed a book about the angry black woman, or did you need a quick excuse to make up a reason as to why there was an entire investigation into you bullying your staff?
When you type in a question on the Google search engine, it would, as we've all seen before with autofill, try to guess what your question will be, sort of like the modern-day technological Mad Lib. So, to fill in the blank, to be intuitive for you, when she typed in, why are black women so, ... the autofill from the computer, the machine, trying to guess your thoughts, maybe shape your thoughts.
A big issue with Meghan and her supporters is that no one can call her out without having to suffer through the agonizing, "you're just racist" comments. Unlike Meghan, I don't feel the need to prove myself to my subscribers or blog readers because I know the work and activism I've put in. My followers know that, and at the end of the day, the activism we do isn't something that needs to be cheered on, nor do I need a gold medal because I do what I do. I don't need someone to say, "Thank you so much for speaking out." Because as humans, we're supposed to. It's the bare minimum. That's what I believe. But for Meghan, oh no. She needs to be championed on. We have to tell her, "Oh, thank you, great leader of women and mother of modern-day feminism." We have to sit here and painfully listen to her retell the dish soap story 90 times about how Meghan didn't like how women were portrayed in this soap commercial when she was a child. So she took it upon herself to write the company a letter, and before you know it, they changed the commercial.
I don't think it's right for kids to grow up thinking these things, that just mom does everything.
For a social studies assignment, Meghan and her classmates were asked to watch some commercials and assess their messages.
So I was wondering if you would be able to change your commercial to people all over America.
The company actually changed the commercial to say people, not women.
It's a beautiful story. In theory. Because the funny part is, Tom Bauer reveals in his book that it was just a story that Meghan's father, Thomas Markle, told her so he can empower her as a kid, and it didn't actually happen. But Meghan, as a child, wholeheartedly believed it and is now retelling this folktale in her 40s. I'm not gonna sit here and claim that her palace staff accused her of bullying allegations because she's black and everyone is so mean and racist like she tries to prove. And nothing is more annoying than Meghan feeding into that stereotype instead of highlighting black women. She brought on Ziwe and she was like, "Yeah, people find me aggressive." And it's just like, how can we learn from this? Are you feeding into the stereotype? What's going on here?
Here's the thing about Ziwe. I found her to be incredibly bubbly, warm, and inviting in our conversation setting. But with the persona that she puts on, apparently that's not a universal feeling. She'll tell you.
Usually when I'm talking to an interviewer, the first thing that they say to me is, "I'm terrified of you."
Really?
Yeah, really. And I'm like, oh my God, that hurts my feelings. I'm a sensitive Pisces. Like, I don't want you to be scared of me. That's not my goal.
I mean, look, if you've seen her work, you may be able to understand why, for some people, she can inspire fear in an interview setting. It made people feel uncomfortable, shall we say. Her guests would come on thinking it was just some little internet show. She was professional, she was poised, composed, and then she would just throw these curveballs out that her guests were definitely not ready for.
How does it make me feel to instill terror in people? Horrible. I mean, that's why I wear pink.
Listen, I'm not a black woman, so I'm not going to tell a black woman how to feel in a certain stereotype. But at the same time, from the outside looking in, I think that she's giving them a bad rep. Why would you bring on someone who's like, "Yeah, people are always like, yeah, you're so aggressive"? What are we supposed to learn from this? Are the listeners supposed to leave thinking, yeah, black women are loud and angry? Is that what you're trying to emphasize here?
Who do you want to represent less, immigrants or gay people? Would you consider yourself a good ally?
Caring and proud!
I try.
How do you try?
You
have a book called Pretty Powerful. Why do you think ugly people can't be powerful?
And the issue with any sort of criticism or backlash that Meghan gets, she hides behind the, oh, is it because I'm a black woman?
Sorry, racist.
Are you now? Because you didn't claim your heritage up until you realized you can weaponize racism in your favor as opposed to actually doing anything worthwhile for the black cause. Instead, she berated her time in South Africa and alluded that her baby wasn't safe in the care of a South African nanny and tried to pretend that she was staying in a hut called a housing unit while she was really in a government official's mansion. On top of that, we just talked about how she supposedly got a black journalist fired for her reaction to the Cut interview. And many industry insiders who worked with Meghan in Hollywood said that she identified as Caucasian and that's what would be written on her official documents. Meghan herself said that she wasn't black enough for black rules and she wasn't white enough for white rules. But now she wants to tell us that she's 43% Nigerian, according to a gene test, but when asked what tribe she was from, wow, she couldn't answer.
I was incredibly excited to sit down with Ziwe, a Nigerian-American comedian, actress, and writer.
I just had my genealogy done a couple years ago.
What? What are you?
43% Nigerian.
No way! No, whoa, Jacqueline! Oh my gosh, are you really serious?
Yeah.
This is huge. Igbo, Yoruba, do we know?
So I mean, I'm going to start to dig deeper into all this because anyone that I've told, especially Nigerian women, are just like, what?
This is huge for our community. No, honestly, you do look like a Nigerian. You look like my Aunt Uzo. So this is great.
Oh my goodness, Uzo.
Shout out.
Despite the fact that when you take these gene tests, the tribe you dominate is usually on it.
So I mean, I'm going to start to dig deep.
So anytime you question her and she's like, oh, I have to look into it.
So I mean, I'm going to start to dig deep.
Do you now? And there are only 3 major tribes in Nigeria, so it's not like she had to memorize 20. I personally don't believe that Meghan is 43% Nigerian, but whatever, I'll let her rock. It's almost scientifically impossible for someone who comes from a mixed race, her father being white and her mother being black, for her to have nearly 50% of her DNA be one background. But whatever, let's let the illiterate rock and do their thing. It's just interesting how there are so many new revelations with Meghan. She could have said in the interview where she wasn't too black or too white that she's also 43% Nigerian, no? But maybe she didn't take the test then, right? Why look into something if you're not currently using it in this chapter of your life? And listen, Meghan can be 78% Nigerian for all I care. But can we talk about why Ziwe was like, oh my god, this is huge for Nigerian women?
This is huge for our community. No, honestly, you do look like a Nigerian. You look like my Aunt Uzo.
Why? Is she gonna be a champion for Nigerian women now? Or did we need a white-passing American to represent Nigerian women for what exactly? Is she starting a charity fund there, or what? Then she proceeds to tell Meghan that she looks like her aunt. I must be trolled. Like, I have to be in a simulation where my eternal hell is listening to this conversation. The truth of the matter is, Meghan is trying to find a reason, an excuse, as to why people have called her out and exposed her globally. And the reason is that she is someone who bullies her staff, belittles women, gets a black journalist fired for the Cut interview, and is someone who will run anyone over to climb the social ladder. She's a champion for women's rights, but cut off her sister. She's a champion for black people, but didn't invite anyone from her mother's side to the wedding, and didn't even send her condolences to her black uncle's widow when he passed despite him raising her for some part of her life. And I spoke about that in one of my previous videos. Instead of using this time to talk maybe about the differences that visibly black women go through versus light-skinned or white-passing women, we sit there through another victim party that Meghan throws herself. She wants the world to use the black women are angry stereotype to defend Meghan when she's called out for her aggressive behavior. Flipping out on women, bullying staff, throwing tea. It's insanity. And that's the issue with the entire podcast. It forces you to look at the bad or highlight something that isn't the whole picture. She invites these guests on to talk about some BS stereotype and doesn't once make an effort to highlight how they've overcome it or how these women still found massive success despite the stereotype. And that should be the thing that listeners learn. We should be inspired after listening to the episode, but instead, there's nothing to learn from the podcast. For example, she had Constance Wu on for a very emotional episode where Constance opened up about what she was going through behind the scenes of her show Fresh Off the Boat. Constance faced a lot of backlash for complaining when her show got renewed for a 6th season and ended up saying that she felt abandoned by the Asian community because she got a bunch of hate and death threats from Asian women, one of them sending her to the ER because she wanted to end her life after all the hate. She ended up saying that she wanted the show to end because she was going through SA by one of the producers, but honestly she could have went about it in a different way instead of, "Fuck, I'm so upset my show got renewed." Now, Constance hasn't been employed in any big projects since her outburst because Hollywood doesn't want to hire anyone who's gonna constantly complain publicly. And now, she's trying to win people back despite being one of the biggest actresses in the world from 2016 to 2018. Now, what was the reason for Meghan bringing Constance on? It's like she's bringing on women who are regretful of their bratty behavior, and we as an audience are supposed to learn what? Even if we're supposed to learn something from her, Meghan never once mentions her famous movie Hustlers, which she did alongside J-Lo either. So it's not like the women that she's bringing on are being highlighted for their career peaks. You don't even end up learning anything but the women, and the podcast doesn't even promote the women. So you end up leaving the episode feeling the opposite of empowerment and overcoming anything, but more so feeling like a victim who's powerless. For her episode with Paris Hilton, Paris was only on for like 10 minutes out of a 52-minute podcast, and if anything, Meghan was trying so hard to fit Paris into this dumb blonde stereotype while also playing an entire victim story. Because after Paris explains that she's now smart and into investing and whatnot, Meghan has the audacity to ask her, "Do you still identify as a dumb blonde?"
I almost feel silly asking this question, but I have to. Would you still define yourself as someone who identifies as the dumb blonde persona, an archetype?
Not anymore, definitely.
Yeah. When did that change?
Like I said, with the documentary, there's all of those walls coming down that I had built around my heart.
It also felt like Meghan was insulting her at the same time, and mind you, Meghan whines the whole podcast about how she was jealous of Paris, envied her, and judged her. Because Meghan wasn't the pretty one. Oh no, she was the smart one who's known for her looks.
For me, again, it's like, okay, well, I'm not the pretty one. I was like, I was the smart one, I'm the smart one, I'm the smart one. That is all you have to hold on to. So in any other moment, no one cared if I came to the party.
Right.
I have made a video about Meghan's Deal or No Deal comments, so check that out. I also have an issue with Paris's portrayal of things because she tried to say that her childhood was ripped away from her when her parents sent her to a boarding school. And it's like, Paris, girl, you were doing drugs and going to nightclubs at 15 and you want us to sympathize with you that your lavish lifestyle of partying and getting caught with cocaine somehow makes you a victim? Then she goes on and on about how her baby voice, which she's famous for, is something that she's been trying not to be known for, and how Paris is all brains now, and it's like, girl, you monetize this. You monetized this look, the dumb blonde attitude, you made millions off of it, the lavish lifestyle, and she even brought it back recently when Y2K trends were popular on TikTok amongst Gen Z. How are we as the audience supposed to benefit from this material at all? And what does this say about Meghan Markle? She just brings on guests to either work on their rebranding story or just highlight little bumps in the road without even trying to empower women by highlighting all their success despite these so-called archetypes. Instead, she brings on women who have made millions of a story or something, and then it's like, yeah, I don't want to be known for that anymore. It's very tone deaf, it's very privileged, very spoiled, and me as a listener, I personally don't gain anything from it. She also brought on Deepika Padukone to talk about her mental health, and basically, she says, everything was going great for me, relationships, movies, everything. But one day, I was sad, and one day, I woke up and I was great.
I woke up one morning and everything was going well. My films were a success. Personally, beautiful relationship, supportive family. Like, it just sort of came out of the blue. I woke up, I fell, my blood pressure dropped. And then the next thing I know, my life just felt meaningless.
And Meghan says something like, yeah, sometimes you just wake up and you're all okay.
Can you remember a story, like a moment where you just questioned, am I stuck in this label? Am I going to be labeled this if I do this?
Yes, that moment did happen. That moment in 2015.
Oh, interesting.
After I'd come out of mental illness.
What happened?
And when you come out the other side, there's so much to be grateful for. And
I would imagine when you go from really being in a dire state and then,
yes,
you've gotten to the other side. And people think it's going to be some big ta-da. Do you remember like where you were when you said, oh, I feel better now?
That's your advice on mental health? Like, there should be a trigger warning for anyone who's struggling and hoping to get advice, because newsflash, you're not gonna. I just feel like it's the wrong portrayal of mental health, and there's nothing the audience can learn from it. There's no progression. We don't know how Deepika went from being depressed to being A-okay, and if you guys were trying to be relatable, you failed. After all of this, these little examples, I could go on for another 20 minutes. You want me to believe that this travesty is what got nominated for a People's Choice Award? Come on guys, I run a celebrity blog and I've been exposed to award shows and how they're rigged and bought many years ago. I even made a video showing celebrities who exposed rigged award shows themselves. And I've had multiple articles about how award shows work, what types of award shows are rigged, and have their awards bought. So go check that out and let's gain some practical knowledge on this channel as opposed to feeding this victim agenda and to try to give an excuse for our nasty behavior like Meghan Markle does on her podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and my review of the podcast. Be sure to leave me your thoughts in the comments down below. Let me know if you agree or disagree, and let me know what other topics you want me to cover. Follow us on our social media, like and subscribe for more content each week, and as always, I'll see you next time.